Well, hello again. I am back and I'm so excited to introduce you to two wonderful friends and conversation partners, Juanita Campbell Rasmus and Trevor Hudson. Let me tell you about Juanita first. Juanita is a speaker, writer, spiritual director, and contemplative. She co-pastors St. John's United Methodist Church in downtown Houston with her husband, Rudy. She has long been a very beloved member of the Renovari ministry team. And in 2020, she released her book, Learning to Be, Finding Your Center When the Bottom Falls Out, which has been a great help to many of us in examining the relationship we hold with ourselves and why that matters so much. So thanks for being here, Juanita.
What a joy. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Also here we have Trevor Hudson. Trevor has been part of the Methodist movement in South Africa for more than 35 years, where he also spends significant time giving the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. Trevor has authored 22 books, including one called Discovering Your Spiritual Identity, which very much touches on the themes of this lesson. Probably since this bio was written, Trevor's written 5 or 6 more books. We'll have to get a more accurate count later. Trevor is also a regular lecturer in several spiritual formation programs, including, and I think especially, the Renovari Institute. And at the Institute, I've had the privilege of hearing Trevor teach so helpfully on these issues of identity. Much of this teaching session, at least the good parts, were based on ideas I learned directly from Trevor. So, Trevor, thank you for your teaching and thank you for being here.
It's a real gift, Carolyn, and lovely to be with Juanita as well. Lovely to see you both and be part of this conversation.
So, friends, we're discussing in this session the picture we hold of ourselves and why it matters so much in our formation journey and in our life with God. And so I want to hear what's resonating, what isn't resonating in the lesson you just watched. But maybe we can start the conversation. I'm wondering with each of you how your own picture of yourself has changed over the years. Juanita, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you. You know, that was such a good lesson, first of all. And then when you ask the question, how has our picture changed? You know, for me, the description you gave of the performance addict, that's what I call it in Learning to Be, the approval seeker, that person who is longing to feel valued, accepted, and approved of. That was the image, the picture I had of myself. And that image was created, as most of our images are, by so many influences coming into our lives. For me, one of those was the church. At the time, I did not have an understanding of a loving God. My God image was more like Judge Judy in America. I always say a cross between Judge Judy and Santa Claus, and both of them were looking for a reason to put you away, checking the list, making sure you've been nice and not naughty and that kind of thing. It wasn't until I experienced the rug being pulled from under my feet through a mental health crisis that I had to confront the image, the picture, the narrative that I had created and was living into. That very crisis in my life became the opportunity for me to see that that narrative did not serve me. It did not serve my relationship with God either. And so, yes, thank God my narrative has changed. I think so often we can find ourselves running from these certain situations, conditions, and circumstances in our lives, the kind that create the dark night of the soul, like my experience did for me. We want to run away from it, but the reality is it's a going through opportunity. The shepherd in 23rd Psalm said, walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And it is that going through these spaces of desperation, these places where we are the grain of seed that falls to the ground and cracks open. It's in the divorce, the health diagnosis. It's in the bankruptcy. It's in the political environment. It's in the challenge of our finances that we can have the opportunity to rewrite our narrative, to rewrite, to reconstruct, to recreate the picture of who we absolutely are in Christ before God. And so I am so grateful. You know, if you'd asked me in the moment, you know, when I was sleeping 18 to 20 hours a day and couldn't function as a wife and a mom and a pastor, if you'd asked me then, I would have said it was the most, can I say, hellacious experience of my life. But the reality is, now looking back, it was the most transformative because it gave me an opportunity to see who I really was, that I really was beloved, that I really was. I like the way a friend of mine says, the apple of God's eye. So yeah, my story has changed. And I think for most of us, if we'll allow our circumstances, the ones that we thought would destroy us, if we'd allow them to cause us to be cracked open to the possibilities, then we'll begin to see who we really are in Christ, that we really are beloved.
So good. Thank you. And that takes us right back to our picture of God, too, because if our picture of God is off, then when those crises come along, we think that it's judgment or punishment but if we know that God only wills our good, only wants love for us, then we can start to let those be processes of discovery. Yeah, so good.
Absolutely. And oh my gosh, what a profound moment for me. And it was moments, but there are some specifically that I talk about in Learning to Be that were just, it was as though, I remember one very clearly, waking up every morning feeling like I was falling or had been falling in this dark tunnel, right? And I remember, because of my exposure to the 12-step community, them saying that you want to hit rock bottom. Well, in me, there was this horrible fear of what would it be like to hit rock bottom. But then when I did, Trevor, Carolyn, it was as though God was sitting there. The Trinity was like, what took you so long? We've been waiting on you. And the amazing love that was there. That's the beauty of our narratives, our pictures, our images being transformed, because the love is radiant and it's so present.
How about for you, Trevor? How has your picture of yourself changed over the years?
That's really a big question, hey, Carolyn. I think my mind goes back most probably immediately to the first time I ever went for counseling, which was when I'd been married for about 18 months or so. And that began a long time of counseling, of therapy, of reflecting on myself. And I think then my identity was so deeply linked to what others thought of me, to how much I could contribute, to a little bit of my place within the church and my role. So I think that was that's when I first began to do some very conscious identity work. And in terms of what you were saying in your own helpful talk, Carolyn, that I was kind of, I think, really working very hard and trying to, I guess, to earn some measure of significance, some measure of appreciation and love from God. So it's been a long journey from there, and I think this gradual, slow discovery that God does love me. And I continue to ask you. You invited folk who listen to the YouTube and watch it. You gave them, Lord, will you give me just a personal awareness of your love? And there's a sense in which I still find myself praying that prayer. And it's not in the sense that I don't know it, but I just have a sense that I still need to know even more deeply the fact that I am God's beloved. And perhaps the last thing I want to say, I'm 72 years of age, and so I feel I feel like a vulnerable, fragile image bearer. And so I feel my humanity very deeply at the moment, and its fragility and vulnerability. And I have a sense that I need to, even in this moment of my life, come into a deeper knowing that in this vulnerability and fragility of this time of life, I am in fact God's beloved image bearer. So it's been a journey, a long one, and it's still going on.
Yeah, where I say in the lesson, will you just experiment each morning asking God for an awareness of his personal love for you? I know I picked that up from you, Trevor, because I know it seems to me no matter what sort of struggle someone comes to you with, that's probably one of the things that you're going to suggest. And it's so foundational. And what I love about it is it's one thing to know in the abstract that God is love, but to be able to feel in your bones, in your cells, in your tear glands, everywhere, that he personally loves you. Juanita, that he's the apple of your eye. That is a whole different reality we're invited into. Yeah, thank you. In the second half of the talk, I talk about the fact that we are bent, and God, out of his great love, wants to see us flourish and unbent us from kind of ourselves being the center of gravity. I worry when I teach that. I think it's very true, but I worry that people will misunderstand that as then the goal is utter self-neglect. And so I wondered if each of you, I know this is a lot, Juanita, a lot of what you're learning to be is about, is how do we love ourselves well in cooperation with how God wants to create in us a love for him, for others, and for ourselves as his beloved image bearer. Do either of you have thoughts about that? Sort of the difference between self-centeredness and self-care?
Trevor, I certainly identify with you in so many ways. When you said after 18 months or so of marriage, you went to therapy. So did we. 18 months must be the magic. That's when the illusions begin to wear off. And you say, oh, we're in this for good. We better do the work, right? For me, as I was recovering, and I still am recovering, because there are various levels of awareness. And Trevor kind of said this when he was saying that he finds himself in a new vulnerability. And so what I've learned, matter of fact, I experienced it today. My mother just had knee replacement surgery yesterday. She's 80 years young, and our family was all gathered there, and emotionally, I felt the toll of the fact that she has some other pre-existing conditions, and I was exhausted this morning, right? I had a full day ahead, and it was in quiet time where the Lord said, get rid of your agenda. Let me show you how to care for yourself. For me, so much of what I'm learning about self-care comes out of a willingness to stay open to receiving God's love in that area of my life, to stay open to receiving God's guidance. God saying to me, you've got too much that you scheduled for today. Let me show you another way. Now, the ego, the small self, wants to say, well, you set those appointments up and you've got to keep your word and, et cetera, et cetera. But the greater sense of knowing that God knows me better than I know myself, And if God is saying time out, then I probably need to take the time out. So it becomes a combination of two things for me: willingness to surrender to the still small voice, and willingness to trust it. To trust that it's okay if I call and say, I don't have the bandwidth for this. Could we reschedule? Right? Or saying to myself, because the things on my list didn't so much affect others as it was my to do. When the call for self-care is about being, who do I want to be? Do I want to be kind? Do I want to be patient? Do I want to be present? And self-care says to me that I must be present to myself before I can be present to anybody else. And so it's an ongoing lesson for me. It shows up in different ways, in different seasons of my life. Matter of fact, I'm actually on a sabbatical right now. But I had committed to this, and I'm finishing the things I committed. But this sabbatical, while I thought it was going to be a deep dive in study and reflection, is actually a sabbatical of presence, because my family, my parents, my children, and my grandchildren are all experiencing some things where my presence is the gift that I'm being invited to offer them. And so it's a new learning. And I find that self-care in a deeply spiritual way is always a new learning. We might use some of the same means: silence, solitude, worship, service. We may use some of the same tools: the examine. We may use the affirmation of I'm one in whom Christ dwells and delights, as our good friend Jim Smith suggests, right? But there can be nuances to how we massage those, how they show up for us. I find the examine is always a powerful tool. What gave me life? What took life from me? What drained me? What sucked the life out of me? And then noticing what I'm noticing. And so self-care is critical, because we can't serve from an empty fountain. If we haven't been exposed and marinated in the presence of Source, then we have nothing to offer. And we find ourselves short-tempered and calling those people who cut in front of us in the traffic line anything but the beloved, right?
And listening both to the question and to Juanita's response, maybe I can just add to what Juanita has shared. I've been thinking as I've been listening that perhaps part of my own self-care is, really receiving the gift of God's present love for me, and then extending that love, to the not so nice parts of my life. And that it's so that when I face my bentness, to use your language, Carolyn, I can go towards that bentness not with a condemning attitude or a judgmental attitude. And when God brings that into my awareness, I can say, Lord, just thank you so much for showing me how bent I am, because the bentness is not on my side. It's sabotaging my life. It's sabotaging relationships. So for me, the revelation of my own bentness by God and God's love and God's Spirit in my life is, in fact, it's in a strange way self-care. In that God's love is helping me to bring my bent parts into the healing and the integration of God's love in my life. And so that's the one thought I just want to add to the conversation.
That's so helpful. When I first started experimenting with the examine, I would see certain things and be like, oh, really, Carolyn? That's still there? I thought we dealt with that 10 years ago. And I really felt one of the few times I feel like I almost audibly heard the Lord speak to me and just say, no, 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 don't judge. Just notice. Just notice. I think you're ready to see this, and now we can love it to life together. Now we can work on it together, so beginning to see that those yeah, when he thinks you're ready for you to even see something, that's an encouraging sign in your friendship together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the fact that Trevor used the word healing, because that's what I'm finding out is that my narrative, the narrative that I'd been telling myself, the picture, I often wear a silver cuff that my husband bought me, and I don't have it on for some reason for today, but I often wear it to remind me that my old picture was me as Superwoman. There's a crisis. Go into the room and come out as Superwoman, ready to solve the situation, right? But now I wear that cuff reminding me that bullets will go through it, and that I have the opportunity as well as the responsibility to notice my vulnerability, to notice when I'm not at my best, to notice that all is not well. And I think for me, one of the things that happened so profoundly as I was recovering, and I hate to say the word recovering, because every day I live with some aspect of what it is to live with a mental health diagnosis. I live with the possibility of relapse. If I pick up old behaviors and think that they are in some way going to serve me well, then I will relapse, right? But what I'm remembering is how profound the healing is when I do notice my bentness, and the examine becomes the perfect tool for helping me to see it, to see, as an example, that I went through the day and somebody complimented me, but I was so busy trying to make sure my agenda got taken care of that I didn't even hear it. One of my neighbors gave me such a gift in telling me once she had done something nice for me and I wanted to repay her, right? And she said, don't do that. You'll block my blessing. What she was saying to me is, Juanita, live in the flow. And so what I'm learning is that I every day say this to myself: I'm open and willing to receive and to give love. And as Trevor said it starts with me being willing to bring love to those places where I saw that in the conversation I had an agenda. And so I didn't hear the compliment that God was using this person to say exactly what I needed, right? Because I don't know if we ever, as an example, get delivered from needing to feel affirmed, but it looks different and it feels differently. It doesn't feel like fuel anymore. It feels more like the cherry on the ice cream sundae. It's a nice thing. It doesn't make the sundae, but it's kind of nice on top, right? And so that kind of healing that self-care can offer us so that we can stay open to receive and to give, so that we do know who we are and whose we are. And we're able to serve our world out of a far healthier place. Going back to what you talked about those missionaries who end up getting burned out. I say often that we don't come to ministry. It's not our gifts that draw us, it's our woundedness, our need to be healed, our need to know deeply that we are loved, and to know deeply that God's love is available and guides us in caring for ourselves on the journey.
This is so helpful. Thank you. Is there anything else buzzing for either one of you? Anything you would want someone engaging with this lesson, thinking about what is my picture of myself? Why does it matter? Anything else you'd want them to know or invite them to think about?
I think I would, Carolyn, I would invite listeners, watchers, to discern between our most fundamental identity as image bearer and other identities that we may have. So for me to just, put that in a very practical way, I am white, I am male, I am 72 years of age, I'm heterosexual. All those, I'm married to Debbie, all those are identity markers of my life. I would want to, though, not find my ultimate identity in any one of those. I think there is a deeper identity, and I think that's what I'd like to offer, for us to find that fundamental identity that we have as image bearer before God, deeply, deeply loved and bent in need of healing.
I like the phrase, notice what you're noticing. I think sometimes we get so busy, we're in such a hurry, and that sprinkled throughout all of our days, no matter how crazy making they may be, there are moments when we are being affirmed as image bearers, affirmed as being loved, and we can pass them up because we're moving too fast. And so I want to invite us to slow down, take some deep breaths, ground ourselves, and then notice what we're noticing, how the ways that we're being loved and cared for. If I could go back for a quick moment, yesterday in the hospital, a woman who's known me for a very long time and knows me as a pastor, came to me and said, "Did you park, self-park or valet?" And so I told her how I parked, and she said, "I want to pay your parking." Right? Now, the old Juanita, who thought that she was a container for love, right, would have said, "Oh, no, 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 no. I got it. No problem." The new Juanita recognizes she's a conduit. And so allowing others to gift me with time or a resource or support is a way God is saying, will you let me love you through them? And so that's something I'd invite us to notice. Notice how there are times we may not get love from the person we wanted, but how love is longing to flow in and through us. Notice what you're noticing.
So good. Well, I'm noticing that I love the two of you, and that you help me see what a good God we thought of each of you and of me. So thank you. Thank you so much for this time. We want to thank the folks watching and invite them to notice what they're noticing and to remember how deeply loved they are. So thank you, friends. We'll talk to you soon.
Good to be with you both.
Very good. Thank you.